Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Before we dive into tonight's creepy story, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a scare. Now, let's get started. It was a crisp Saturday morning, the kind where the fog hangs low over the highways and the sun peaks just above the horizon, casting a pale orange glow on everything. I was driving to my job at the auto repair shop, my mind half focused on the road and half wandering through the mundane tasks that awaited me. As the engine of my old pickup hummed, I turned the radio down, savoring the silence of the empty road. Little did I know, that silence would soon be shattered by a scene that would haunt me forever. Just as I approached a bend in the highway, I noticed a gray Honda Accord speeding past me. It wasn't unusual for cars to zip by at that hour, but there was something about this one that sent a chill down my spine. As I glanced over, my heart stopped. In the back seat, I saw a young woman with wide eyes, her fists pounding against the window. She was pleading for help, and in that fleeting moment, time seemed to slow down. I instinctively accelerated, my heart racing not just from the speed but from the realization of what was happening. The driver, a man with dark, unkempt hair and an angry expression, kept glancing back at her, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a white-knuckled intensity. As I pursued them, I could see her mouth moving, forming words that I couldn't hear but felt deep in my gut. "Help me." The adrenaline coursing through my veins was electric, urging me to do something. I fumbled for my phone, fingers shaking as I dialed 911. "I think I'm witnessing a kidnapping," I told the dispatcher, my voice cracking with urgency. I described the Honda, the man behind the wheel, and the desperate girl in the back seat. The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline amidst the chaos, instructing me to stay on the line and keep following the car. As I remained on their tail, the driver began to weave dangerously through the lanes, trying to lose me. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, determined not to let him escape. The fear for the girl's safety propelled me forward, my heart pounding with every turn they made. I stayed close, giving updates to the dispatcher as we entered a more desolate stretch of the highway, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to swallow the morning light. Suddenly, the man slammed on the brakes, and I barely managed to stop in time, my tires screeching against the asphalt. He jumped out of the car, and I could see a glint of metal in his hand. Panic surged through me. What was he going to do? My instincts screamed for me to flee, but I couldn't abandon her. I shifted into reverse and spun the wheel, trying to create distance between us while maintaining my focus on the girl in the back seat. As I put distance between us, I could see the man yelling at the girl, his face a mask of rage. I couldn't hear his words, but the menace in his voice was unmistakable. I quickly turned around and drove past him, glancing in my rearview mirror to catch a glimpse of his fury. My heart raced faster than the engine, and all I could think was that I had to get to the next exit, where I knew a police station was located. Please just hold on," I muttered to myself as I continued to speed down the highway. The dispatcher was still on the line, urging me to keep my distance and stay safe. I could feel her trying to keep me calm, but I was beyond reason at that point. All I could think of was the girl who was in grave danger. Just as I reached the exit, I saw flashing lights ahead. A patrol car had pulled over, and I felt a surge of hope. "There's a police car up ahead," I yelled into the phone, my voice filled with relief. "I'm going to pull in and let them know what's happening." I veered off the highway and into the parking lot, my heart racing as I jumped out of my truck. The officers looked puzzled as I rushed toward them, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "You have to help. There's a girl being kidnapped in a gray Honda Accord. She's in the back seat." Without hesitation, the officers sprang into action. They jumped into their patrol car and sped off in the direction I had come from, their sirens blaring like a warning through the quiet morning. I stood there, my heart still pounding as I waited for them to return, praying that I hadn't arrived too late. Minutes felt like hours as I paced back and forth, replaying the horrifying scene in my mind. What if something had happened to her? What if I hadn't called? My gut twisted with dread, and I fought back the tears threatening to spill. I thought of her desperate face pressed against the glass, and I felt a mix of fear and guilt weighing heavily on me. Then, the police car returned, its lights flashing in the early morning sun. I rushed toward it, my eyes searching for any sign that they had found her. The officers got out, their expressions serious but determined. "We got him," one of them said, a hint of triumph in his voice. "He's in custody, and the girl is safe." Relief washed over me, and I felt my knees buckle. I leaned against my truck for support, tears finally escaping down my cheeks. "Is she okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. The officer nodded, but there was a flicker of sadness in his eyes. "She's been through a lot, but she's alive. We're taking her to the hospital for a checkup." He paused and then added, "You did the right thing by calling. You saved her life." As I stood there, a mix of relief and anguish flooded my senses. I knew she was safe now, but I couldn't shake the image of her terrified face from my mind. It would linger long after the officers had left, and the sun fully rose over the horizon. A few days later, I received a call from the police department. They wanted to thank me in person for my bravery, and to let me know how the girl was doing. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to face her, but I knew I had to. I needed to see that she was okay and hear her story. When I arrived at the station, my heart raced. The officers greeted me warmly, leading me to a small room where the girl sat, bandages wrapped around her arms and a blanket draped over her shoulders. Her eyes were still shadowed with fear, but they lit up when she saw me. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "You saved my life." I felt a lump in my throat as I sat across from her. I couldn't let him hurt you. I'm so glad you're safe." She nodded, and I could see the tears glistening in her eyes. "He's my ex-boyfriend. I tried to break up with him, but he wouldn't let go. That day, I thought I was going to die." Her story broke my heart. I had always thought of kidnappings as something that happened in movies or the news, but here she was, a real person with a real nightmare. We talked for a while, sharing our experiences, and I listened as she recounted the horrors she had faced that day. As the conversation wound down, I couldn't help but feel a deep connection to her. She was a survivor, a warrior who had endured so much. And in that moment, I realized how important it was for her to share her story and for me to hear it. When I left the station that day, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. I was grateful she was alive, but I also felt the weight of the trauma she had experienced. It was a reminder of how fragile life could be and how important it is to look out for one another. It was a brisk autumn afternoon in Chicago when I decided to set out on a journey that would shake me to my core. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the bustling streets as I packed my bags into my trusty old sedan. I was headed to Boston, where my cousin Leah was gearing up to run her first marathon. I had promised her I'd be there to cheer her on, and I was determined not to let her down. Rather than opt for a flight, I chose to drive the nearly 1,000 miles. I loved the freedom of the open road, the chance to listen to my favorite podcasts, and the thrill of adventure that came with each mile. I pulled out of my driveway at 3 p.m., excited to hit the highway. The plan was simple: drive straight through the night and arrive in time to grab a coffee and some breakfast before heading to the race. As I merged onto Interstate 90, the familiar rhythm of the road lulled me into a comfortable groove. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and I felt the world outside my car shift into a darker, more mysterious realm. I turned up the radio, letting the music drown out the creeping unease that began to settle in. The Illinois stretch of the interstate was quiet, save for the occasional hum of an oncoming truck. As I crossed into Indiana, fatigue started to creep in. It was just after midnight when I decided to switch to Route 20, hoping the quieter road would allow me to avoid the monotony of the highway. I needed a break from the blinding headlights and roaring engines. The rural landscape unfolded around me, filled with rolling fields and scattered trees, their branches swaying like skeletal fingers in the wind. It was around 1 a.m. when the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Out of nowhere, A black, old-fashioned pickup truck appeared in my rearview mirror, its headlights burning like twin suns against the dark backdrop. At first, I thought nothing of it. But the truck began to inch closer, its massive frame looming behind me. I felt a sudden jolt of adrenaline as the driver seemed intent on tailgating me, a tactic that made my heart race with unease. I tried to ignore the growing sense of dread, but my instincts screamed at me. I hit the gas, but the truck followed suit, mirroring my speed and keeping an uncomfortable distance that felt like a predatory stare. With each passing mile, my anxiety grew. The driver of the pickup made no attempt to overtake me. Instead, they seemed to revel in my discomfort. Moments later, the truck swerved to block my path, forcing me to slow down. I glanced over at the driver, an ominous figure hidden behind dark sunglasses, even at this hour. There was something unsettling in their demeanor. They were enjoying this, whatever this was. I swerved to the left, barely avoiding a collision, and accelerated, heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the truck's presence behind me like a shadow, always just a hair's breadth away. The road twisted and turned, and I tried to navigate the winding stretches while keeping the distance between us. The driver in the black truck began gesturing wildly, signaling for me to pull over. I could feel my pulse quickening, each beat a reminder of the potential danger lurking behind me. Not a chance, I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I weaved through the road, desperate to shake them off my tail. But the more I fought, the more determined they seemed. As I approached a traffic light, the truck sped up beside me, its engine roaring as if taunting me. My stomach dropped as I saw not one, but three masked figures inside, their faces obscured by dark fabric, eyes glinting with an unsettling intensity. The sight sent a chill down my spine. I was trapped. The light turned red, and instinct kicked in. I pressed the accelerator, running the red light and swerving into the intersection. I could hear the angry honks of other drivers as I darted through, but my focus was solely on escape. I glanced in the mirror and saw the black truck halting, its headlights still aimed in my direction, but I had gained a small lead. The relief was short-lived. The truck roared back to life and began to pursue me again, the distance shrinking with every moment. I could see the silhouettes of the masked figures moving around, their hands gesturing wildly as if orchestrating a macabre dance of intimidation. My mind raced with fear and adrenaline. What did they want? Why were they targeting me? I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly as I navigated the winding backroads. The headlights from the truck illuminated the trees lining the highway, casting eerie shadows that danced alongside my car. I needed a place to hide, a way to lose them. Suddenly, I spotted a Walmart parking lot up ahead. My heart raced with a mixture of dread and desperation. I turned sharply into the lot, hoping the bright lights and sense of safety would deter my pursuers. I parked in a far corner, hoping to blend into the darkness, my heart still pounding in my ears. As I sat there, I glanced out the window, watching the entrance of the parking lot with a mixture of fear and hope. The truck's headlights swept through the lot, searching. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. Minutes felt like hours, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I had escaped them. But then I saw it. The black truck slowly rolled into the lot, and my stomach dropped. It was clear now that they weren't just random road rage. They were hunting me. The truck came to a stop, and the masked figures inside began to scan the area. My heart raced as I ducked down in my seat, hoping to go unnoticed. Through the glass, I could see them exit the vehicle, the three figures stepping into the fluorescent light. They moved like wolves, their movements purposeful and predatory. They scanned the parking lot, searching, and I could feel my breath hitching in my throat. Suddenly, I remembered the emergency exit. I had to get out of the car, make my way to the store, and find safety in the crowd. Gathering my courage, I glanced around. The lot was mostly empty, save for a few late-night shoppers milling about. I took a deep breath and opened the door, praying I wouldn't be seen. I crept toward the store entrance, keeping my head low and my body close to the cars. But just as I thought I was safe, I heard a voice call out, "Hey! You!" My blood ran cold. I turned to see one of the figures standing by the truck, their mask reflecting the light in a way that made it seem as if they were grinning. Panic surged through me, and I sprinted toward the entrance, heart racing as I pushed through the automatic doors. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, illuminating the aisles filled with snacks and household goods. I ducked into a nearby aisle and pressed myself against the shelves, trying to catch my breath. I could hear footsteps approaching from outside, muffled by the sounds of the store. I grabbed my phone and dialed Leah, but all I could hear was the frantic pounding of my heart. She picked up, her voice filled with sleep. "Hey, what's wrong?" I struggled to speak. "I'm being followed. I don't know what to do." "What? Where are you?" she asked, concern lacing her words. "Walmart, just outside of town. I think they're coming inside," I whispered, panic gripping my throat. "Stay calm. Find someone to help you," she urged, and I could hear her heart racing as well. As I hung up, I glanced around the aisle. A cashier was ringing up a customer, oblivious to my fear. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I needed to find a manager, someone who could help me. I slipped out of the aisle and made my way toward the front of the store. The footsteps were closer now. I could hear them approaching, their voices low and menacing. "He couldn't have gone far," one of them said. My heart raced as I glanced over my shoulder. The masked figures were inside, scanning the store with an unsettling calmness. I hurried to the customer service desk, praying for a miracle. "Help! Please! I need help!" I gasped, my voice trembling. The clerk looked at me, confusion flashing in her eyes. "What's going on?" she asked, but I could see the fear rising in her expression. "Those guys, they're after me," I stammered, pointing to the entrance. Before she could respond, one of the figures stepped into the store, and my stomach dropped. The cashier had seen them too, and her face went pale as she rushed to the back of the store. The figure's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a rush of terror. "There he is!" they shouted, and my instincts kicked in. I turned and bolted toward the rear exit of the store, the adrenaline surging through my veins. As I sprinted through the aisles, I could hear them behind me, their footsteps pounding against the floor. "Get him!" one yelled, and I pushed myself harder. I burst through the back doors, out into the parking lot, and saw my car in the distance. I ran, my heart pounding louder than ever as I fumbled for my keys. I glanced back and saw them exiting the store, determination etched on their masked faces. I couldn't let them catch me. Finally, I reached my car, fumbling with the keys in my shaking hands. I could hear them gaining on me, and I practically threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door behind me. I quickly locked the doors, gasping for breath as I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I threw the car into reverse, narrowly avoiding a collision with another parked car as I backed out. I spotted the figures approaching, their movements swift and deliberate. Panic surged through me as I shifted into drive and sped away, tires screeching against the pavement. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I drove straight out of the parking lot and onto the road, my heart racing as I fought to regain my composure. The adrenaline still coursed through my veins, leaving me shaky and terrified. I drove for what felt like hours, the dark landscape blurring past me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to wake up from this nightmare. I finally pulled over at a rest area, my hands trembling as I parked under the bright lights. The reality of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. I was shaken, my body trembling as I leaned against the steering wheel. I thought about the masked figures and the terror I had felt. What had they wanted? What if they had caught me? I finally managed to pull myself together enough to call Leah again, my voice shaking as I recounted the terrifying experience. "I'm safe now," I told her, though I could feel the remnants of fear still coursing through me. "I'm so glad you're okay. Just keep driving and get to Boston," she said, her voice a lifeline amidst the chaos. With a deep breath, I pulled back onto the road, my mind still racing with thoughts of what had just happened. The journey to Boston had taken a dark turn, but I was determined to make it. The night stretched on, filled with shadows and uncertainty. I pushed forward, keeping the speedometer high and my eyes peeled for any sign of the black truck. I drove for hours, every mile a testament to my resilience. As dawn broke over the horizon, the sun began to illuminate the landscape, washing away the darkness that had haunted me throughout the night. I felt a surge of hope and determination. I would make it to Boston, I would support Leah, and I would put the horrors of the night behind me. It was a chilly Tuesday night in March, the kind where the air feels thick and heavy, and the world outside seems muted beneath a shroud of fog. I had just left my friend's house, where we had spent the evening catching up over drinks, laughter, and stories that felt far too nostalgic. As I drove along the deserted highway, the dim glow of my headlights struggled to cut through the dense mist that enveloped the road. The clock on my dashboard blinked ominously, 1:42 a.m. The only sounds I could hear were the soft hum of the tires against the asphalt and the occasional rustle of branches swaying in the wind. I always prided myself on being a cautious driver, especially on nights like this when visibility was a luxury I couldn't afford. The farther I drove, the more I felt an unsettling sense of isolation. The dark trees lining the highway loomed like silent sentinels, their silhouettes distorted by the fog. It was easy to let my imagination wander in such an eerie environment. Just when I thought the road was going to be smooth sailing, a glimmer of black caught my eye. A sedan, sleek and ominous, was parked half on the shoulder, half in my lane. Panic surged through me as I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing as the tires screeched against the wet pavement. I skidded to a halt mere inches from the vehicle. The fog seemed to thicken around me, making it feel as if the world had shrunk to just me and that car. I took a moment to breathe, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought they might leave imprints. The interior of my car felt suddenly too small, too confining. I glanced toward the sedan, straining to see through the mist. A figure emerged from the driver's side, a tall young man, perhaps in his early 30s. He walked toward my car, and I felt an involuntary shiver race down my spine. He approached with a calmness that was almost unnerving, raising a hand in a friendly gesture as if to signal me to roll down my window. I hesitated. The way he was looking at me, with a strange mixture of urgency and impatience, set off alarm bells in my mind. "Hey there!" he called out, his voice smooth and reassuring. "I think you should pull over to the side road. The fog is pretty bad tonight. It's safer that way." I shook my head instinctively, the image of my comfortable, familiar home urging me to stay put. "I'm fine, really. I just need to get home," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising unease in my gut. As soon as I said those words, I saw the change in him. His expression shifted, the warmth fading into something darker, something threatening. The smile that had previously graced his face vanished, replaced by a scowl that twisted his features. My instincts kicked in, and I locked my doors, knowing I had made a critical mistake in engaging with him. "Come on, just pull over. It's really dangerous here," he insisted, his tone now laced with frustration. He reached for my door handle, his fingers hovering just above it. It was at that moment that I noticed movement from the passenger side. A second man emerged, and my heart dropped. He was bulkier, wielding a baseball bat as if it were an extension of his arm. I froze, the dread settling deep within my chest like a heavy stone. The second man was charging toward me, his intentions clear and violent. I didn't have time to think. I slammed my foot on the gas, the engine roaring to life as I reversed the car, narrowly escaping the man's swing. My heart raced as I executed a sharp turn, tires screeching as I fled down the highway, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I glanced back just once, my mind racing with fear and disbelief as the men stood there, mere shadows in the fog, their expressions a mix of rage and confusion. The road blurred past me in a haze of white and gray, my focus solely on getting away from that harrowing encounter. Each glance in the rearview mirror only heightened my anxiety, the shadows of the two men becoming haunting figures etched in my mind. I could still hear the echoes of my heart pounding in my ears, mingling with the whooshing sound of the air rushing past my car. As I sped away, The fog thinned out gradually, and the familiar sights of my neighborhood began to emerge. I finally let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But relief was short-lived. The image of that sedan, parked on the side of the road, loomed large in my mind. What had I stumbled into? Who were those men, and what did they want from me? Once I reached home, I locked the door behind me, every creak of the house feeling amplified in the silence. I flicked on the lights and paced around my living room, replaying the events over and over in my head. I knew I should call the police, but what would I say? 2 men tried to attack me on the highway? It sounded absurd, like something out of a cheap horror movie. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, haunted by the close call. Each time I closed my eyes, I could see their faces, the fury in the driver's eyes, the wild swing of the bat, images I couldn't shake. My mind kept wandering back to the road. What if I hadn't locked the doors? What if I had listened to him and pulled over? The what-ifs clawed at me like a relentless beast, refusing to let me find peace. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of that night lingered. I avoided the highway, taking longer routes to work and planning my outings carefully. I was constantly on edge, always looking over my shoulder, the paranoia embedding itself in my daily routine. It wasn't just the fear of encountering those men again. It was the realization that danger lurked in places I had once considered safe. One night, about a month after the incident, I found myself sitting in my living room, the TV flickering in the background. I absent-mindedly scrolled through social media, trying to distract myself from the lingering anxiety. As I scrolled, a news article caught my eye. Local men arrested for series of highway attacks. My heart raced as I clicked on the article, dread pooling in my stomach. The report detailed a string of incidents involving 2 men who had been preying on unsuspecting drivers on isolated roads, luring them to stop before attacking. My hands shook as I read on, the familiarity of their descriptions sending chills down my spine. The article said they had been caught after a victim managed to escape and report the incident to the police. I felt a mix of relief and terror wash over me. I was just one of many, but I had narrowly escaped their clutches.